Let me go ahead and do the intro here. Yogesh Rao, he leads product management and UX for the CDSM team at United Healthcare Clinical Solutions. He has 26 plus years of experience leading product teams at Novell, Yahoo, UHG in the US and India. Yogesh has his MBA from Babson College. Let's see if I can get this right, in Wellesley, Maine. Hopefully I got that. MS degree in computer sciences from Boston University and leadership certificates from Stanford and the Indian School of Business. Yogesh is an avid runner. I would have to say he is at 75 marathons, including 50Ks, 75Ks, and 100K ultra marathons. He has participated in 2 editions of the Nilgiris 600-mile bicycle ride through the scenic mountain ranges of South India. He has 2 daughters who take turns playing mother and grandmother. Sounds awesome. Please join me in welcoming Yogesh Rao. Okay.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Hey, so folks, let me jump right to this because time is not on our side here. I have great pleasure here being here today, this afternoon with all of you, talking about a topic that I feel really very passionate about product management. So, not sure how all of you have made your way into product management or are aspiring to get into product management, but the way it happened for me at least was 2002. I was working as an implementation consultant, traveling about 48 weeks in a year, and I was burnt. So I was speaking with my manager at the time and told him like, hey, I can't do this anymore. First child is on the way. Traveling this much is just not possible. So my manager told me like, hey, there is this associate product manager role. You have a lot of experience implementing the product. Why don't you jump into a product management role? And thus 2002, my manager literally placed his sword on my shoulders and said, thou art knighted as the product manager. And here I am, no idea what the role is, what I have to do. So I asked my manager like, hey, what should I do, right? Like, what is this role all about? And he says like, hey, 2 important things. You are now the CEO of your product, and number 2, always listen to the customer. The customer is always right. The customer is the king. Do right by the customer and you're going to be fine, right? And then first week, second week, first month, and then I'm realizing like, hey, something is not right here, right? Reality number 1, CEO of the product, and here is what I thought I was like, hey, CEO is like a big role. I get to decide where like my product is going. But here is what it really turned out to be. I was clueless. I had no idea what I had to do, right? And the second reality was, he told me always listen to the customer. And then I'm like, okay, how do I listen to the customer? What do I do? Like, what do you mean when you say listen to the customer? And there are so many avenues to listen and to get feedback. And there are things like customer advisory boards, conferences, industry conferences. Like, where do I go, where do I spend time, how do I prioritize, how am I going to listen to the customer? And that's literally where I was screaming help. So not sure how many of you can relate to this. I do not know, like where you are, like in your journey as a product manager. But if you can relate to being here, being tossed into the frying pan and trying to figure your way through this thing, right? So if there is, anything that I want you to take away from today's session, then these are the 2 big takeaways. One, it's not important just to listen. We can all listen, but the real important thing here is to understand, to really see what the customer is actually not telling you, right? So sometimes it's important maybe not to listen. Number 2, um, buyer versus user versus market. If you look at the pragmatic marketing framework, there are 2 important boxes or 2 important tiles in that framework. One is user persona, the second is the buyer persona, and then there are a whole bunch of tiles or boxes that are on the left hand side of the pragmatic marketing framework that actually relate to market and market problems. If there is one thing that you need to understand, or if you want to take away from this, don't focus so much so on a buyer or a particular user. It's important to understand the market. So putting these two things together, you don't want to be just listening, you want to be understanding, and don't want to be understanding a buyer or a user or a particular user. You want to be focused on the market, right? So how do you do this? Like what are some of the ways to do this? So in essence, there are three mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive ways to listen or to understand your market. Okay. The first one is you speak with your market. Second thing, speak with the people who speak with your market, right? Like engage with the people who engage with the market. And option number three is to use data and analytics. Think about it. There is no other way to do this. Those are the only three ways that are available, right? So I've also given some examples of what these are: leads, prospects, look at the addressable market, customer advisory boards, focus group discussions. So I have worked both in B2B settings and in B2C settings. So depending on what kind of a product you have, these things may change a little bit, right? And then when you have to engage with the people who engage with market, you have sales support, field marketing, etc. And then data and analytics, you have any number of things that are out there, right? Sales funnels, trouble tickets, web logs, instrumentation that you can do within your product. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do there, right? So now, which of these methods are really more effective? You think about it, right? I've kind of used horse carriages and car at the bottom here, basically to go back to that cliche, which I will not even repeat. I'm sure all of you are familiar with, like the Ford popular statement, right? Like about faster horses versus automobiles. So which of these three methods are better, right? Like which of these three are like really effective? So number one, if you speak with your market, rarely do people open up to you. I don't know how much time you get with your users or with your customers. Rarely do people open up to you. Sometimes people will say some very cliched things like, hey, go sit with your users, see how they engage with the product, observe their settings. Come on, nobody's going to open up their doors for you, right? And if you're in a B2B setting, it gets even more worse, because your account manager who handles your account or the salespeople rarely will take the product management people with them on a sales call, right? If you're lucky to be on a sales call, you'll just get some bits and pieces of information, nothing, or if you're lucky, maybe a little bit of actionable information, right? So that's proved, like to be pretty ineffective, right? If the salesperson takes you with them, normally it is because they want you to give a demo, right? Number two, speak with the people who speak with the market. Do this at your own peril. If you're engaging sales and support people, right, more than what they are telling you, they're going to ask you for what you're going to give them, right? It needs to be a two-way street. And the thing that they're looking for you from you is like commitment. When are you going to make this particular release? When are you going to fix this particular problem? And when you have that conversation with them, make any promises at your own peril. Because if you do that, you know what they're hearing? You may be saying something like, I'm expecting to make this release in Q2. What they're hearing is, I'm going to make this release on June 15th, right? And guess what? They're going to go talk to customers and make that commitment on your behalf. Not every salesperson is going to do this, but I have been burnt enough to know, like be really very careful when I'm engaging with people who engage with market, especially people who are within my own organization. And if you're working with data and analytics, normally these tend to be a little bit more kinder on you. It's hard because you need to instrument, you need to work meticulously at this. It is hard work. Getting data and analytics to work for you is extremely hard, but you need to do it, right? What I have seen is like it works very well. So the other thing is, if you speak with the market, they're going to be telling you what problems they have and what solutions they want from you. And if you don't solve the problem they expected it to be solved, they're not going to be happy with any solution you give them. If you work with the salespeople, they're going to tell you, I need it and I need it like right now. Okay. You need to be prioritizing my issues as number one, right? which again causes a lot of friction and heartburn in the process. Normally, data and analytics again tend to be non-judgmental. They're okay. You can make your inferences and you can validate, right? So you can see where I'm kind of going with this, and you can see what my preferences are. I typically have always leaned more towards data and analytics, and I've been burnt enough by market and people who engage with market to not use them as my primary source of requirements. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that you should never speak with your market. I'm not saying you should not engage your people within your organization. You should definitely do both of these. But what is your primary source for getting requirements? Use data and analytics, and then just do some validation, speak with people to see like, hey, I'm this is my hypothesis, and get that hypothesis validated, right? So use number one and number two, the first two options for validating hypothesis, but build your hypothesis based on data and analytics, right? So that's my big takeaway on this. Okay, so having said that, you can see where I'm kind of leaning with my, with at least some may call this prejudice, but where I am, like with my opinion. So if you have meager amount of resources, right? Like all of us, in our organizations, we are not operating with infinite amount of budget. I've been hiring product managers for close to about 12, 14 years now, for my teams. What kind of request do you think I get the most, right? Invariably, product managers on my team come to me with two requests. One, they're asking me for travel dollars. Hey, Yogesh, I need to go to, like California. It's winter, of course, like totally understandable. That's when customers are most available. We are in Minneapolis, and so hey, we need to go to California to get requirements. And the product manager may genuinely be going there for getting requirements. What I'm hearing is like, hey, I'm sick of winter. I need a break from this. I need to go to California for a vacation. I'm not approving it. So the other thing that I keep hearing often is focus group discussions. Hey, we need to spend money on conducting a focus group discussions. Let's call in 20 people. Let's do all kinds of funky things here and get some good inputs. And it's very hard to conduct a focus group discussion. And sometimes it starts with getting lists from Dun and Bradstreet or any one of those marketing organizations. And at least for me, I take at least like 3 to 4 months to get ready, like for focus group discussions, because even the questions you ask them need to be carefully crafted. And if you're not going about it the right way, I haven't seen them being very effective. So both of these normally I do not approve very easily. But the part that really, I don't hear a lot, but I wish, like more people came to me with request, like in my team, was spending more money on tools and for reporting and analytics. Uh, I rarely hear people do this, but if this is another takeaway for you, right? Like if you have money and if you have meager amount of resources available to you, spend more money on instrumentation. Get your developers, your engineers. They don't like doing a lot of reporting, especially the type of reporting that tells things like, okay, here is Adobe Analytics or Google Web Analytics, or how many how many records did we process yesterday. Like get all those operational metrics instrumented into your product. This is not the coolest thing to do compared to building like a AI or a NLP based system or a advanced neural network based system for doing like something really very funky. Your developers do not like doing this, but find the resources to do it. Spend money on tools, spend money on analytics. This will pay you dividends like you cannot imagine, right? Okay, that said, I'm going to go to a case study, and we'll spend a few minutes on the value of this, right? And then we'll have enough time for doing Q&A. That's my hope. All right. So we'll get into this case study. I have several more case studies. I'm kind of holding them back because I didn't know how much time we would have. So case study number one, B2B is generally considered to be a pretty dry place, right? Like you are working in a very, sterile environment. B2C companies typically tend to have a lot of flashy products. You don't see a lot of investment going into like B2B products. But here is a classical example. I'm sure all of you have at some point of time engaged with a internal system, like a classical internal enterprise application. And here is one, right? SAP. I don't know how many of you have engaged with the SAP Travel Expense Manager. This was a tool that was quite popular back in the days. The closest competitor for this product was Oracle iExpense. So if you have used Oracle iExpense or SAP Travel Expense Manager, um, really, this was not a very good experience. Just navigating the screens, trying to get through creating an expense report was a pretty difficult exercise, right? And for those of you who work in professional services organization, there is a lot of information that goes into conducting or having like the expense reports, especially because you have a lot of folks, like who are normally on the field, who have to travel all the time, and they're looking at expense as a pain, right? It's just another thing that they need to engage in, and they don't get paid in time. So if you want to really create a bad employee experience, just don't pay them on time. That's it. You can imagine what kind of a impact that will have, right? You can imagine. So incomes, like this product back in 2002, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, called Concur. So I really love this product, Concur, because they came into an area where there was not much innovation going on from a user experience perspective. Um, when at a time when travel expenses was seen as a very dry environment, and here it is, right? Like suddenly this is now no longer a expense management system. This becomes a travel management system. You can book tickets directly from within Concur, right? It allows you to look for departure city, arrival city, and gives you all kinds of flight options. It can work with Sabre. All these integrations that they created with Sabre, Amadeus, and a whole bunch of other travel booking sites out there really made a very big difference. And the results, right, like that it was able to produce was pretty significant. If you look at it, right, like I don't know how many of you actually saw this. um, SAP ended up buying Concur Technologies. This was back in 2014, and they paid $8.3 billion for this company. And here was a company that was built in Seattle, and Steve Singh, he's the founder of the company, and I had the I had an opportunity to engage with him, and I was asking him like how is it that like you were able to bring in so much innovation in an area where we normally do not see a whole lot of innovation. And he said like, hey, here is what I did. I actually focused on the users. I understood how the users engaged with the expense management systems, spent a lot of time trying to understand what the users actually wanted. I didn't let the buyer persona distract me. I didn't let anything else distract me. I just focused on users and the market, right? And over a period of time, we were able to bring in a whole bunch of innovation to this area. We were able to take away, like this. We kind of came in as a silent entrant in a space where, like two horse carriages were trying to go faster, and we came in with this automobile, right, like called Concur. So, not sure how many of you can relate to this. I mean, for those of us who have been in this industry for a while now and have seen, like multiple cycles happen, it's pretty impressive, like when something like this happens in a B2B space, right? And those of you who are in B2B, please do study this company, because we don't get a lot of case studies where we actually see someone coming in with innovation. Where they actually make the user's life easier in an enterprise. Typically, we are trying to work with the buyer persona and make life easier, like for the salespeople, so that we can get more sales, right? So, in conclusion, um, understand your market. This is like really very important. Don't listen to customers and just mindlessly give them what they're asking for, because there are a lot of people who do this. I have fallen prey to this, because back when I started as a product manager in Novell, we used to go to this industry conferences. Like we used to have our own user conference once a year, and we had like this group of 12 or 13 people who we used to call as the customer advisory board, and we used to do whatever they asked us to do because these were like our most squeaky wheels. We did whatever they asked us for, and guess what happened? That area, right, like did not really, we were operating in a pretty mature industry, and most of our users were probably not even engaging with like 20% of our product. We built 80% of our functionality which was never really used by anyone. um, the second piece of advice I have is like develop market segmentation. I don't see many companies that still do this or do this well. It doesn't, you don't have to have perfect market segments, but develop, at least have a hypothesis for what your market segments are. Okay, and then build some user personas. This doesn't again take a lot of effort. You don't need like user experience or designers developed user personas. Product managers can do this themselves. And most importantly, test your aspirational user persona, right? Let me give you an example here. So we built a product called horoscopes. So back when I was working for Yahoo, we built a product called horoscopes that we, our going in hypothesis was that two of our segments, user segments, we called first user persona as the Sex and the City woman, the ladies who were in the age group of 20 to 35, and then the chief home officers, as we would call them, the chos, who were in the age group of 30 to 40. We thought that these would be like our primary user personas for the horoscope functionality that we had built. But guess what happened? When we launched the product and when we started seeing, we could see, like who were the users who were engaging with our product, because we could see who was logged into Yahoo, and we were able to get some good information. We found that it was typically men in the age group of 50 to 70 who were actually our horoscope readers. And we then decided to make a change, and we actually moved the horoscope module from women's lifestyles, which I was the product manager of, and we moved this to news.yahoo.com. So that change was made because we were able to look at the aspirational user persona that we had and validate that against the real user personas who are actually engaging with our product. Second thing is create avenues, channels to receive data point. This is hard work, guys. This is really hard work. Focus on what is important. Don't focus on vanity metrics. Instrument everything. Try to get as much instrumentation into your product as possible so that you can see how many times a link is being clicked, how your users are engaging, from what screen to what screen do they go, and make sure that you're capturing all this information because it gives you a lot of very important information. It tells you like what parts of the product you should not focus on, right? Third important area, focus on being information rich, not data rich. After you have instrumented, just don't keep, being a glutton for data. Look for information. Look for information that will actually help you make good decisions. And as they say, again, this is a cliched statement: torture your data. It will eventually confess to something really very good, right? Something that you can use. And with that, I conclude my presentation here today, and I happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, well, thank you, Yogesh. And for the people attending, on the top right, there is, if you'll see it across the top, chat, polls, people, Q&A. If you want to put your questions in there, and or if you want to type them in the chat, we'll see if we can get them.
Sounds good.
So let's see. Brian put, old objection. Do you want money for reporting on your existing feature, or do you want a new feature? Can't have both.
Yeah, really good question. So something, this again, like to me sounds like a question on prioritization. Where do we invest? Should we continue enhancing our existing features, or do we, make investment in a new feature? So when you if you have sufficient data about your existing feature, you know how much value it is producing. You can see how many users are engaging with it. You know how your existing feature is working. Now, what you do not know is the new functionality that you want to add, and how it will perform in the when it is launched. So there are multiple ways to um, have a hypothesis, create a hypothesis, and validate a hypothesis. One thing that you can do is um, find a very low tech way to create something and test it out there. Let me give you an example. So we have a tutoring platform, right? Let's say there is a tutoring platform and we want to test if launching a math functionality in this platform will really make a difference or not. So one of the ways to do this could be to test your math functionality using some really low tech ways out there, like use YouTube, Facebook. There are any number of free tools that are out there on which like you can probably do some very quick test and have some numbers, right? Like you at least have some data to show whether this new math feature will work or not. So we like between me and my wife, we were looking at possibly launching a tutoring platform after COVID started, and we were like, okay, hey, what do we do, right? So we put some advertisements out there. It's not that difficult to have a few ads on Facebook and say like, hey, tutoring offer, open for business, right? And we noticed that we were not getting enough uh, students to create a platform that would be self-sustaining, right? So we could definitely run it as a service, then get enough cash flow and then create a product. But we found that like it was not a self-sustaining business. We would not be able to break even for a long while to come. So we shelved the idea. So my wife decided to take a job like in a different place. So she continued working, right, and she's still teaching. So anyway, I mean, that's some of the ideas that I have in terms of like, should you invest on an existing product, or do you go invest in a new product? And there are multiple ways to have a hypothesis, develop a data driven hypothesis, and then launch something really very small. I'm a firm believer in lean methodology, lean thinking, where you're able to pivot very quickly if the idea is not really working out very well, or like invest more if the idea is working very well. So I mean, unless I know a little bit more about the specific instance, I don't have a lot of very pointed feedback to offer. But hopefully, this was helpful.
Okay. So Sophie has a question. So you are saying focus on end users rather than the customers. In the B2B space, sometimes sales is the gatekeeper for customer data. Any thoughts on getting through to sales to get to the customers before we have end user data to mine?
So, Sophie, I'm guessing that you still don't have your first customer. So if you still do not have your first customer, you are you have to be focused on data, but a different type of data. You should be looking at your win loss analysis. Typically what happens is at least for the first few days, till you have the first customer who's engaging with your product and you have more information about how the product is actually being used, you don't have a whole lot of information available, right? So when you're there, your primary goal has to be to try to get more sales. So at that point, like you are going to be dependent on win loss analysis, loss reasons, win reasons, and things like that. That's where you should be focused on. And if possible, try to help the sales folks with like giving more demos and such. Now, one big caveat here, right? Like if you are working in a B2B environment where you're not running in a where you're running in a hosted environment and it's not a cloud offering, right? Like Concur, where you have a centralized product which is running within your premise, and you can see how the users are engaging with the product. If it's a hosted environment, you still have some options, things like telemetry that you can build into the product, provided you're not operating in an environment like mine. In an environment like mine, it's a healthcare environment, like what I do in my full-time job. So there, like there is not much of an option to build anything with telemetry, because you'll be violating HIPAA and other constraints. So definitely, like work with win-loss analysis. If you don't have your first customer, work with sales, see how much data you can get there. There's a lot of information that can be gained by looking at the data that they have. And once you get your first customer, depending on what kind of a product you have, you can either build some telemetry, or there are multiple options there to see how the users are engaging with the product within the enterprise.
Okay. Well, thank you. And well, we're out of time, but we're the last, I don't know, last class, if you will. So I'm gonna go ahead, and unless the software cuts us off, I'm gonna take this one last question. So
Sure.
this one comes from Priya. Thanks for the presentation and case study. How do you suggest a small organization with several limitations allocate time and resources for this kind of analytics and informational learnings within the product effort?
Really good question. So um, again, I do not know the specifics of the organization, but what I see, Priya, happening in the industry today is that more than the large organizations, it is the small organizations that are actually leveraging analysis and metrics like never before. Because there are tools like Google Web Analytics. There are tools just like Google Web Analytics. There are multiple tools out there where, of course, like you'll have to put a little bit of a JavaScript payload or something along those lines with your product. So the analytics are being leveraged like never before, especially in the within small organizations which operate in the resource constrained environment, like the one that you mentioned. Happy to share more tools that are available. Many of them are actually freeware that you can use. Of course, like once your organization starts doing better, you will have to buy the premium edition, or there will be some money you may have to pay. But initially, at least, like when you're launching off, if you're a really small organization, if you're a startup, there are any number of tools that are available for doing some really good analytics out there.
Okay. So it would seem to be that we're at the end of our time here, as well as questions.
Happy to take any questions anyone may have beyond the time. I know we have a really very short time here, but if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Okay. So, well, thank you everybody for attending, and thanks for participating with Product Camp Twin States, and thank you very much. All right. See you, everyone.
Thanks.